Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Drew, and I'm currently a senior here at UAlbany majoring in Homeland Security. And today I will be talking about human trafficking within the United States and how women are affected by it in relation to justice, equality, diversity, and inclusion, which is also known as JEDI. So, human trafficking is not exclusive to any country. It's a global phenomenon that has persisted centuries within and across countries. Even today, it is a growing problem in the United States, with many victims being women under the scrutiny of gender bias. And while policies and protocols, such as the 2000 Palermo Protocol, have made some progress in combating human trafficking, this issue has continued to make a substantial impact on the government and various communities throughout the country. One population that is disproportionately affected by human trafficking is women. And although any gender can be targeted for trafficking, women account for nearly half of all identified victims, and combined with girls, they make up 70% of identified victims. In addition, the glorification of prostitution in Western media, such as Snoop Dogg's song Pimp and his red carpet appearance with two prostitutes at his side, increases the gender divide and diminishes the severity of sex trafficking. However, this is not to say that sex trafficking is the only major form of human trafficking. Trafficking can be in the forms of forced labor, domestic servitude, debt bondage, child soldiers, and forced marriage. Now, human trafficking does not have a single recognized definition. However, there are entities that have provided basic definitions. It was not until the United Nations enacted the United Nations Against Transnational Organized Crime and the Protocol to Prevent, Suppress, and Punish Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children, also called the Trafficking Protocol, in 2000, that human trafficking became a major legal category. Following this protocol, the United States Congress passed the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act of 2000, which is also called the TVPA, which provides a more specific definition. The TVPA defines human trafficking as one, the recruitment, harboring, transporting, supplying, or obtaining a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of involuntary servitude or slavery. Or two, sex trafficking in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, in which the person induced to perform sex acts is under the years of 18 of age. And as mentioned before, the 2000 Palermo Protocol is a United Nations protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in human beings, especially women and children. And it supplements the UN not require the victim to be transported. In addition, trafficking is always involuntary while smuggling is voluntary. And lastly, women are more susceptible to risks involved with disasters and crises due to inequalities within the social and economic realms. As already discussed, there is a historical aspect of gender inequality and marginalization of women. For example, before the education reform during the progressive era of the 20th century, women were educated towards jobs society deemed appropriate, such as a secretary or journalist, while men were given more well-rounded education that included the sciences and maths. This perception that women should assume only proper roles of the wife, mother, and the civil worker has influenced the way we think about women in the workforce even today, as women experience higher rates of unemployment and lower wages than men. And this figure right here just depicts how the COVID-19 affected the US labor force, and it shows how men experienced smaller changes in their participation in the workforce, whereas women saw a significant decrease in their participation in the workforce. I would also like to discuss how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected women based on the pressure and release model. This model introduces the idea that certain issues may cause an individual or group to be at a higher risk for disasters or other issues once a hazard is introduced. A root cause for the reason why women were more susceptible to the risks of COVID-19 is the historical marginalization of women, which has led to the dynamic pressure of a lack of ethical standards in keeping women in the workforce. As such, the decline of women in the workforce, whether due to being laid off, as some employers prioritize male workers, or the sense of obligation to take care of the family at home, has unproportionately affected women as they have lacked the proper income needed to prepare for and protect themselves against COVID-19 and its economic impact. In addition, as the pandemic became a deadly crisis, the governments began to devote their resources to combating the virus, which often came at the expense of anti-human trafficking resources. As such, this new allocation of resources resulted in a decreased protection measures and service provisions for victims, a reduction of preventative efforts, and hindrances to investigations and prosecutions of the traffickers. And despite government responses involving expanding protection measures for victims and reducing the risk of human trafficking, the effects from the pandemic may be long lasting and will force various sectors to collaborate and intensify their responses to human trafficking. So there is this huge focus on female sexual exploitation that leaves other victims and forms of trafficking overlooked. Despite the diversity of the forms of human trafficking, the focus of this field has long been skewed towards sexual exploitation, and specifically that of women and girls. It is a historical and ongoing trend in which human trafficking is equivalated to sex trafficking, primarily of females. As such, men are overlooked as victims, and trafficking forms such as forced labor and debt bondage are given less attention to, as much of the resources towards anti-human trafficking efforts are allocated towards sex trafficking. Now, as for women, many outside of sex trafficking rings and knowledge may have the mindset of, oh, she wanted this, she entered this workforce, rather than empathizing with the fact that no matter how voluntarily a woman became a prostitute, she is still a victim. Women who migrate are also more at risk for sex trafficking as their vulnerabilities increase. Women who migrate are more at risk for sex trafficking as their vulnerabilities increase. Sorry, gender inequality has a large influence over the labor markets in the countries of origin, which creates a pull factor influencing women to migrate to liberal countries such as the United States, which remains a popular destination country for human trafficking today. And women are more likely to migrate to escape gender inequality and gender-based violence in their home region, or to gain better wages to send income back to their family. As such, female migrants are more likely to be vulnerable to high demanding labor, which includes sex work, as traffickers take advantage of these women and capitalize off their vulnerabilities and desperation for income. In addition, trafficked women and girls encounter higher rates of physical and sexual violence, which includes homicide and torture, psychological abuse, terrible living conditions and work conditions, and just extreme deprivation in general. And during the stay-at-home orders of the COVID-19 pandemic, this was even worsened as victims were forced to remain with their abusers and traffickers. Serious mental health problems can also result from trafficking, which can include anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation and suicide itself, self-injurious behavior, drug and alcohol addiction, and PTSD. And physical symptoms among trafficking victims can include neurological issues, STDs, chronic pain, respiratory distress, gastrointestinal disturbances, and just in general, very traumatic fractures and injuries. And this is not just exclusive to sex trafficking. This includes all other types of trafficking, including forced labor. Now, a solution to the problem of female trafficking victims experiencing increased risk due to the pandemic may involve a systemic integration of anti-human trafficking efforts from the government and NGOs into existing response plans. In addition, there should be a switch from reactive to proactive planning to enhance the flexibility of resources and responses to as the pandemic and other crises have proven to be unpredictable. Now, in addition, a solution to the issue involving migration should be focused globally, as countries should make efforts to enhance social development movements for women in the countries of origin to prevent women from feeling the need to migrate. Um, However, destination countries should also continue to make efforts in humanizing and rehabilitating victims of human trafficking rather than focusing on punishment. Victims should not be viewed as criminals for their involvement in trafficking. And lastly, rather than enacting policies or plans, I think it would be most effective to reflect upon the root causes of this way of thinking to abolish this issue um, of the sexual exploitation. Workshops and seminars should be held to discuss biases held towards sex trafficking, prostitution, and human trafficking as a whole. Here are my references. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I am now open to any questions anyone may have. Thank you.